we have roll call, please?
Yes, Chairperson Jan Clark-Kretz,
Here.
Vice Chair Bonnie London,
Here.
Matt Fox,
Here.
Russ Kelly,
Here.
Eden Lee,
Here.
Joanne Bridges, Catherine Sears, Auxiliary Member Jesse Lunford,
Here.
and Auxiliary Member Rebecca Goling.
Here.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Now is the time for committee comment for items not on the agenda. Does any of our committee have any comment for items not on our agenda? I actually have one. I wanted to let you know that I contacted Miguel Yukovich from a meeting at 3 o'clock, just because I wanted to make sure he was wanting to do public comment. Apparently there was a family emergency that they had to take care of, but he has some public comment that he's going to be sending you, Mary Beth, that he was unable to talk about. So thank you. All right.
Thank you, Jan.
Sure. Is there any public comment for items not on the agenda?
And if any member of our public panel has a comment, please just raise your hand and I will be paying attention to hand raising. I will unmute you and bring you into the meeting. Seeing none.
Okay, seeing none, we're going to go forward with adoption of the agenda. Now's the time for one of the committee members to potentially form a motion to adopt the agenda.
I so move to adopt the agenda.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Can we have roll call, please?
Yes. Let me get back to that page. Catherine Sears. Bonnie London.
Yes.
Joanne Bridges.
Yes.
Eden Lee.
Yes.
Russ Kelly.
Yes.
Jan Clark-Kretz.
Yes.
Okay.
And Carol, did you note that Catherine Sears showed a yes?
Yeah, I did. I got that. She
Perfect.
put her hands up.
Perfect. Okay. Now we're going to go to committee matters, but before we do, we're going to do introductions, and it'd be nice for all of us to introduce ourselves and maybe just a little bit about how long you've lived in Loomis or whatever. But since there's a bunch of people here that I don't think have had a chance to introduce, let's take time to do that. Mary Beth, would you like to lead us in that?
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome everybody to our first Parks and Recreation Subcommittee meeting. I'd like to first start by introducing your staff. Mary Beth Van Boris, Planning Director, Town of Loomis. Carol Parker, Planning Assistant, Town of Loomis. Anders Hauge, Hauge Bruick and Associates, our Town Planning Consultant. His assistant, Christy Consolini from Hauge Bruick. Our chairman for this, hold it, let me go back to Mark Teague, technical staff with PlaceWorks, town consultant, and his staff member, Lucy Rollins from PlaceWorks. Also, we have as chair and vice chair, in that order, Jan Clark-Kretz and Bonnie London. And all the rest of you are committee members. So I thank you for your opportunity to participate and be here with us. And now we can just go around the room. You can unmute yourself independently and give us a little something about yourself, please.
I'm Russ Kelly, and I've been in Loomis probably 55 years and served 20 years on the Placer County Parks Commission. And served with Little League, soccer, all the youth sports, it seemed like, and very interested in what we're doing for Parks and Recreation in Loomis. Thank you.
Yep. Well, I'm going to go across the screen here. Catherine Sears, can you unmute? Catherine? It's on the left-hand side of your screen at the very, very bottom. There's a button that says mute. Do you see that?
I had, okay.
There you go. We can hear you now.
Okay, I'm Catherine Sears. I've been here about 18 years. Originally in the Bay Area, but a brief time in Grass Valley. I was on the previous Parks Committee. I love parks. I go to the Blue Anchor every day in the week to walk my dogs, and they love it too. So,
Excellent.
and I created a park in Concord when I was living there.
Excellent.
That's
Thank
it.
you. Thank you. Bonnie.
There, I am a relative newbie. I've been here for going on 7 years. I serve on the Planning Commission. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the work that this group's going to do. And so thanks everyone for being involved.
Thank you. Eden Lee.
Hi, yes, my name is Eden. Lived in Placer County now for about 20 years. Actually live in Loomis now for just over 5. Currently, I work for California State Parks as a land agent. Previous experience with land and right-of-way work and some civic planning. Have some experience here within town volunteering with our local Cub Scout pack. And then now that my son is with Troop 12 with Loomis, I'm the one of the assistant scoutmasters for our troop. Yeah, I'm just happy to help out.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's see. Jesse Lunsford.
Hi, I'm Jesse. I am at the corner of Taylor and King, so my park after 4 o'clock is Loomis Grammar School. But now that I see Jan's listing their local parks at Indian Creek, I'm thinking hole 2, hole 3, I can do a walk around those ponds.
I like your style, Jesse.
I'm a walker, so I walk every day of my life. So.
All right. Let's see. Rebecca Goling or Galling. I'm sorry. How do you say your name?
Yeah, it's Galling, like olive or octopus. So thanks. Rebecca Galling. I've lived in Loomis for 26, going on 27 years, raised my kids here, Del Oro, et cetera. And so Loomis has always been, my community, and I basically would like to stay here as long as I can. I live in officially the unincorporated area on Tudsbury and Auburn Folsom, but I still very much consider myself a Loomis resident and am thrilled to be on Parks and Recreation. I have a long career with AT&T and retired recently.
Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you.
Joanne Bridges.
Hold the button down? Yes. Okay. I'm Joanne Bridges. I've lived here about 15 years and I'm retired. I've been retired a long time. And I also walk with Jesse sometimes when my schedule is good. It's compatible with his. And I like small towns. I'm interested primarily in walking places in Loomis besides the Loomis Park School. That's it.
Thank you. And Matt Fox.
Hi, yeah, Matt Fox. I've been in Loomis for about 8 years now. Have been heavily involved with youth sports pretty much that whole time between my kids. I've got 3 kids. They're all at, well, 2 of them are at Del Oro. One of them just recently graduated from Del Oro. Currently the president of Loomis Soccer. Been heavily involved with the soccer program here in town for the last 4 years or so. And, obviously fields are, kind of our lifeblood. So I spent a lot of time coordinating with the town and the county and the school districts on fields and parks, and I've coordinated with the county on a couple of projects out at Loomis Park, Community Park, making some improvements out there. So my big thing here is to make sure youth sports is represented here in this decision making process.
Thank you. Sorry, my screen is really weird right now. I'm Jan. I've lived here most of my life. I'm 57. My family has a business here. I'm just so extremely excited to live in Loomis. I went to Del Oro, class of 81. My daughter went there too. So super passionate about our town, and glad to be sitting with all of you with your incredible experience and passion. This is going to be a really great group, I can tell. So thank you for everyone. Did I miss anybody? No? You want to take it away, Mary Beth? You're on mute. There you go.
Yes, there we go. It takes me a couple of seconds, but I catch on. So welcome to our first committee meeting. The way that we run these is we ask that you allow the presentation, which will be done by Mark Teague. Let him get through his presentation. Keep little notes along the way so that after he's completed and we don't derail him with questions here and there, keep your notes, and at the end of his presentation, we'll address all your comments through the raise hand feature. Also, just so you know, this meeting is being recorded, live streamed on YouTube. So the benefit for that is, let's say you're not able to attend a meeting, you'll always be able to go back and see what you missed and pick it up from there. There will be some homework assignments and things like that. So, it's kind of important to at least stay in touch with the committee at your own pace, and then, circle back around for the next meeting. As you're aware, these meetings are going to be conducted regularly once a month. Same date, time, as far as like the 3rd Thursday of the month at 6 o'clock. So you will always know that your committee meets at that time. The only change that would happen to that is, let's say staff has some stuff to do prior to the next meeting. In that regard, then we would cancel the upcoming meeting, skip a meeting, give staff a break to do what they need to do, and then bring it back at the next meeting. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Mark Teague. And thank you, Mark, for being here. And Lucy.
Thank you so very much. Lucy does all the hard work. I just do videos on the side, right? So I'm going to give a brief presentation about the general plan. I'm going to share my screen in a moment. And I apologize to all of you that have heard this 3 or 4 times at this point. But it's essential, and we'll go through it, and I'll try to be as brief and as informative as possible. By the way, this is my favorite subcommittee because parks and trails and all that stuff, that's the fun stuff. Everybody else argues over the other things. I love this part. So, all right, let me share my screen. Hopefully you can all see my PowerPoint presentation here. And I need to apologize ahead of time. You all appear on this screen. My PowerPoint's on this screen and the camera's in the middle. So you're going to see my left ear and then my right ear because I go back and forth, particularly as you're talking. So I apologize, that looks a little weird, but that's why. I'm old, and so when people are talking, I want to look them in the eye like I was taught in the Scouts, as a matter of fact. So welcome to the subcommittee, Parks and Rec. And without further ado, we've gone through the introductions. What we're going to go over today is availability of documents, current general plan, setting, and those types of things, as well as other documents that come up along the way. We'll give a brief overview of the point of a land use element within the general plan or the and how it deals with open space and parks. And we might even tickle some conservation in there because of the wonderful benefits and assets that the town has. We'll talk a little bit about the schedule so that you kind of know what to expect moving on. And then, of course, the most important part is to listen to your discussion so that Lucy and I can take notes and we can inform the rest of the analysis. So we've gone through this part. This is the website that the town has set up to place information, and we will try to keep it up to date as much as we can. The current Parks and Recreation Master Plan is from 1997. There was one that was done since then, but I don't believe it was ever officially adopted. And in my world, draft plans and concepts and ideas don't matter. It's what the town actually adopts is what we can regulate. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the land use section. It is an interesting plan. You should familiarize yourself with it, because if we make changes, if the town wants to make changes to that plan into some of the contents, certainly someone's going to call you to task on it. So you might as well know what's in it. The purpose of our work is to identify open space and recreation areas. I know that seems obvious, but it isn't obvious to everyone that we have to plan for these well in advance of development. Often in many communities, parks and open space are left to the last minute, and that makes it both expensive and less than useful. Often developers, if left on their own, will push parks and open space to the most undesirable parts of their project. I've seen them adjacent to freeways, places where nobody really wants to hang out. So by planning in advance and putting them on the map and really talking about policies, we set the flag for them to understand that anybody coming in needs to follow the town's expectations. We all need to be healthier. Well, I don't know about you all, but I need to be healthier. And I love the fact that Jesse walks every day. I try to walk every day. And it is something that we all know as we get older, we pay attention, but even young people know this as well. It used to be that open space and parks was literally only about little league fields and baseball diamonds and whatnot. And frankly, it's become much more than that. We now use open space to get around. We advocate for what we call non-motorized transportation or active transportation plans, ATPs. You'll see that a lot. We're starting to integrate open space and recreation into as mundane things as designing roadways, as looking at the gaps between buildings. Any little place that we can encourage people to congregate, recreate, and essentially enjoy life and slow down seems to me to be something we should go for. With all that, though, we have gaps in the system, and we know that, and you know that because you live in the town, and that's one of the reasons most likely you're on this committee. So it's important for us to identify those gaps, and then working through this process, work to solve and to address those gaps. It's also important that we provide goals and policies on open space and recreation. Now, this will get a little disappointing for those of you that are looking to set up a new schedule for co-ed volleyball, because that's usually too granular for the type of work that we're doing at the general plan. We try to stay at the really high policy level to get in at the very beginning of the process. There are other mechanisms like a park and recreation plan and ordinances and whatnot that really drive the day-to-day activity of the parks and rec folks. However, it is important that that all be founded on policies and goals established in the general plan. Currently, the general plan has a 5 acre per 1,000 goal. So what that means is for every 1,000 population, the town should have a 5 acre open space goal. Now, this doesn't necessarily, in the olden days, back when I was a youngin', that meant a 5 acre park. And planners would dutifully plunk down 5 acre parks in all the places where they thought there would be additional population. And that's really easy to do if you're planning in an area that is not developed. If you're looking at an agricultural field, that's really easy to do, right? Well, we're going to take this 5 acres and that's where the park is going to be. In reality, and in particular in a town where you already have development and where the additional growth is more likely to be infill or a change in density of areas you've already designated, that could be a little more difficult to define and to provide for. I would argue that after this last year, we all should appreciate our open space and parks and trails a great deal more than maybe we did in 2019. And I think this is an issue we're running into in communities throughout the state. People are realizing, particularly those that didn't have the amenities that the town is fortunate to have, has worked toward. Now they're starting to go back and say, maybe we should knock down a few things and put in a park here. When I was living in Merced, we had a building burned down in the downtown. It happens. It was unfortunate. They rebuilt someplace else. In the interim, somebody filled the spot that it was in and put in lawn, just a lawn, no other amenities. There's a big brick wall on one side. It became the most popular place for people to have a picnic lunch, to hang out, just open green space. There weren't even any benches on this spot. So people naturally gravitate to these open space areas, and they become a defining piece of your community. So even though people may say, well, it's a park, who cares? Let's talk about a shopping center because that generates money. I would argue that without parks, there's no point in having a community. I think that parks are the most important part of what we do. As I said in my video earlier today, it may be frosting, but without it, all you have is a muffin. And what we want is a cupcake. So we need to take a look at this. This is the only map that we have of the existing amenities, and we know that it's not complete. One of the things that doesn't show, for example, might be any joint use agreements that we have with schools or other educational institutions or people that have open space areas. It also, to my mind, doesn't show any trails that might be in the area, real or informal. But this is where we're starting from in terms of information. And one of the hopes that we have as we get to go through this and we start to get comments from all of you is to make this a little better. We added to the original map here the Blue Acre Park, and it was a little difficult to find out information about that park. So, one of the things we probably need to do is to be a little better at advertising where these are. Those of you that lived here for 35, 40, 50 years already know where everything is, but new residents and folks that are just learning the community may not know where some of these amenities are. So we have these listed. We need to know where everything else may be, and we'll do all of this on mapping. And my goal is I never want anything on paper again, because I'm notoriously bad at finding paper. If we have it all electronic, then it's available to everyone to look at and to use. As we talk through this particular issue, and this will be partially informed by some of the land use work that will be happening, we need to find out if there are areas of the community that are underserved by parkland. And we need to think about what that means. And do we need to plan for park in that area? How do we do that? Now, there are standards for open space and park, a distance to walk, roads to cross, those types of things. Parks on either side of a freeway, you'll see that often. That's because most of the standards for placing open space says that if you have to cross a major conduit like a freeway, like a rail line, that's really not conducive to walking. And we try to make these all so they can walk. I don't know if you remember being told as a child, but I could go as far as I wanted on my bicycle. I just couldn't cross the street. And so you go around the block. Well, a lot of that is similar to open space. You want young people to be able to get where they need to go without having to cross really busy roadways. And I know that seems odd in the town of Loomis that prides itself, but you do have some busier roadways that you might want to have young people cross. We also should talk a little bit about park and recreation facilities, community park plans and centers, those types of things. And I think we should really focus on lineal parks and mini parks. Now, there's a dirty little secret that comes along with some of this, and that is that city managers are typically not excited about new parkland because obviously there's a maintenance cost. However, planners, being sneaky and weaselly at a certain level, have discovered that certain things, such as stormwater treatment, stormwater storage, can be used, open space and trails can be used as part of the overall system that does double duty, keeps our waterways clean and our natural resources pleasant, but also helps us maintain some of these trails and open space. So I don't want to dwell on that, but I just want you to know that there are lots of dual usage that can happen here that isn't, just building everything in a basin and it floods every couple of years and we don't worry about it. Even those lineal features can be used to help support the town's development, or even just remedy some issues that are already there. If we have some flooding in a certain area that happens during rainstorms, that can all be built in. We know that the town, at least of what we've seen in the surveys thus far and in the input that we've received, isn't trying to be another Rockland or another Roseville. That's great. What we need to know is where the growth is going to be focused and make sure that our resources to support those new residents that end up in the areas that we've directed them enjoy the same kind of amenities that you all experience now and revere. So we'll be talking about where that open space goes. And sometimes that gets tricky. I mean, if we're looking at an infill development in the middle of the downtown, well, that may help with the housing element, but where do they play as a park? Is it going to overload one of the facilities we already have? These are all things that we will talk through and figure out how to address as a group. And then, are there any incompatibilities between parklands? Some of the most knockdown, drag out public hearings I've ever been in, where I've been called names and all sorts of nasty things, we're trying to cite a park. Everybody likes parks, they don't want to live next to one. And that becomes an issue. Noise, security, young people hanging out. I had no idea I was such a hoodlum when I was a teenager, but apparently that is an issue that many people are concerned about. Some of that can be addressed through design, and we can talk a little bit about that. And some of that is just making sure we don't put parks near those. We had an elementary school next to a senior facility, and you would not believe the number of noise complaints we got during recess. Right? Because little kids make noise. I had 5 of them. I know this. I love the noise, but I'm also not 85 years old yet. So maybe I won't when I'm 85. I don't know. But those are the sorts of issues you would think that the senior facility next to this large open space of school where the children were playing would be an enjoyable thing. And yet it was a huge issue and something we had to work hard to overcome. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. We won't belabor it because most people like parks. So here's the schedule. Obviously, we're kicking off today. And then as we progress over the summer, we'll have more meetings with the idea of adopting the general plan in end of summer next year. It's not a leisurely schedule, given all the work that we have to do and all of the input that we need to gather from the town. But it's a doable schedule, and I'm certain that we can work toward that. Homework, right? No good deed goes unpunished, and all of you volunteering your time know that you're going to have to do a little homework to bring yourself up to speed on these things. We would suggest that you review the general plan in its current state and the 1997 recreation plan, and honestly, anything else that occurs on that site. There will be other setting documents for other elements that might be of interest to you. Circulation might be one that you would look at, although now it's trendy to call it mobility or access or other things, but it's really how we get around. There are opportunities for comments to be provided here. And the one that I like the most, and particularly for those of you like to go to parks, take some pictures. Take a picture of something you like in a park or open space facility, something you find interesting that should go into the town. Pay particular attention to things, and this is how planners look at stuff, right? So if I go to a new park, I want to know, how are they handling parking? Are there restrooms provided? Where are the edges? Is there lighting? Should there be lighting? Is there play equipment? Is the play equipment in an area near the sports field, right? So that brother or sister is playing a game and junior is able to play on the monkey bars. They even do monkey bars anymore? Teeter totters, roundabout, all those things. They're all in the history. Are they designed well? Do you think it would work in our town? This is the fun part of the homework. I encourage you to get out. If it's in your town, awesome. We can say, let's do more of this. If it's not in your town, say you go to an adjacent area, you go visit some family somewhere, now that that's starting to open up more, take some pictures and then make sure that Mary Beth gets them or post them on the comment site. And then we can talk about those when we're developing policies and goals for the town's general plan. And of course, if you have any questions, you have Mary Beth, and she has access to all of us. Trust me, Mary Beth knows where I work and how to find me. And we can certainly get answers back to you in as fast and as painless as we can. And don't be bashful. There are no stupid questions. And I truly mean that. The only question, I mean, honestly, It's the question that's unasked. And I sometimes make a fool of myself at a staff meeting by asking the obvious questions, only to find out that 3 or 4 other people had the same question. So therefore it wasn't as obvious as we'd thought. So please don't be bashful about asking questions, and we'll be open and as easy as we can to answer them. And so with that, I am done with my brief opening remarks. I do have one more thing to show, and I will show you as soon as I find what happened to it. It's interesting, my monitor died. And this is like peeking behind the tent a little bit. We still haven't, so this would happen to be a spreadsheet. Those of you that do these on a regular basis, I don't know if you can see this. So there are a number, this is the historic growth rates for the community. We won't belabor that. There are a number of growth rates based on that. And this is really just back of the napkin stuff. These are different growth rates. What I want to point your attention to is this number right here. If we grow at a relatively sedate 0.69%, which has been our annual growth rate for the town for the last decade, then at the end of the 20-year planning period, we've added about 1,000 new residents to the community. Now, you need to be careful with that number because sometimes the residents are simply buying the homes that are there. One of the things I will show you is our persons per household. This is what this kind of, can you all see this? I can't see what you see. So this is persons per household, and this is a summary of the Department of Finance Demographic Research Unit. The town every year, usually around this time, right, Mary Beth, has to report to the state a number of building permits issued, a number of, there's a whole bunch of stuff that gets reported. And from that, they generate these lists. So I go and I take this information, it's all publicly available. And I'll eventually post this on the resource page for you, so you can play with it yourself. And you can see our persons per household. You can also see our vacancy rate. Now our vacancy rate's a little under 5%, 4.3%. And what that means, that's actually a pretty good, healthy rate. So what can happen sometimes is the persons per household can go up. And you'll find this when young people buy homes and older people have moved to a smaller facility or smaller home. Young people buy because young people have children, right? And so sometimes our growth isn't necessarily just a function of new building permits. That's what I wanted to bring with that. So if we come down here, we have about 1,000 people over a 20-year period using this growth rate. Now, if we were to use the SACOG rate that I was lamenting with Andy about early on, which is 1.46, which is roughly double, we might need 10 acres. It's 2,300 people at the end of that planning period. I don't know that I would worry that. I've used this rate for our discussion because I think the last decade is pretty indicative of the next decade, but who knows, right? And this isn't my number to pick. That's one of the things we'll talk about with the full land use committee, and others far smarter than me will figure this out. So, but I wanted you to look at this number because given our current rate or requirement of 5 acres per 1,000, this means we need about 5 acres of new parkland to accommodate the anticipated growth in population over a 20-year period. And what I'm hoping we can do is build that into the plan so that as growth occurs, open space occurs. I think it's really hard for a community to backfill if open space is not provided as growth occurs. I think it really becomes difficult to add a park after you've already got people living someplace or you have businesses there. And with that, Mary Beth and Jan, I will shut up. It's not my meeting, it's yours. So available to answer any questions, of course.
Thank you very much. I know I have a few questions. Does anybody on the committee want to raise your hand or ask a question? Look, Jesse, go for it. You want to unmute Jesse?
Yeah, I'm trying, sorry. Mark, buddy, we're kindred spirits.
Yes.
The park system to me is one of the most important things you could possibly have at this time. And when you look at the numbers and you look at population, we're right around almost 7,000 people. Where's my 35 acres of parks?
Couldn't agree more.
We're already in the hole right from the start.
Yes.
And I understand the SACOG numbers because again, California is now pushing for an incredible growth rate. So the old growth rate numbers, I think, are out of date. Some of the items that were listed as far as park space, you've got Lumen Space and Community Park that's not even in the town limits. Private land, I mean, Jan's land is private. It's not really a park space.
Yep.
But I love your idea as far as doing a co-mix with storm drains, water canals, whatnot to increase the trail space. I think in today's environment too, a big push is for the mini parks, the little waterways. I absolutely love the what do you call it, Blue Anchor Park. I think the design on that one was great. I think it's got a little bit of everything for everyone without being overwhelming. And that's about all I got.
Jesse, can you repeat that again? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. What kind of park were you saying that you really liked?
I like the Blue Anchor. It's a mini park. I consider that a mini park. It's got a little bit of everything for everyone. It's not intrusive to a neighborhood. We see a lot of that in newer developments. There's one behind the Bass Pro Shop where they're sneaking these basically quarter-acre parks in place, where it gives you some equipment. It gives you a little bit. It's not a full-blown 5-acre park. You're not going to put a ball field on them, but they do serve a purpose in small neighborhoods that you're trying to get some kind of park activity in there. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Mary Beth, were you, I'm not sure who's next in terms of hands.
Rebecca Goling.
Okay.
Just some quick questions. So when we're talking about property, I presume it's all must be in the incorporated boundaries, right?
For our general plan purposes,
Okay.
it needs to be in the corporate boundaries or within our sphere.
And does that include purchasing property or grooming existing property? Or both?
Both, really.
Okay. And pardon?
The traditional way of getting parkland is as dedication, but that's starting to wane a little as there are fewer and fewer subdivisions. The Quimby Act, upon which the 5-acre per 1,000 was originally based, really only applies to the division of land. You have to have a separate ordinance and a separate process to ensure that multifamily or things that aren't divided on a subdivision basis can open the land. So the town will need to look at a variety of ways of getting the land, either purchase, that sort of thing.
Okay, so it could be either.
Yes.
Okay, and then last question, would the ditch water easements be possibly considered for running trails? And who owns that?
Those are both good questions. I don't know. The answer to the one is most often we can do that. The answer to the other is what depends on whether the first answer can happen. Some irrigation districts who typically own these types of things are opposed to people on their facilities for liability reasons, right? If somebody goes swimming or falls off, becomes an issue. And so we often get some pushback there, but that's not universal. I've worked with Merced Irrigation District, Turlock Irrigation District, Oakdale Irrigation District, others in the Central Valley who have embraced this idea of eyes on their facility, right? So the more Jesse's and Joanne's that we have walking the facilities, there's less opportunity for mischief. And, you know, as long as Jesse doesn't go skinny dipping in the canal, we should be fine. But at the end of the day, there's that balance between access and liability. But certainly the committee should explore, and we can provide some more information on.
Okay, thank you so much.
Matt Fox, you're up next.
Yeah, sure. I guess my first comment would be on that growth rate. I'm not sure if you're aware of the housing developments that are being proposed currently, but there's probably 600 homes proposed or working their way through the proposal process right now. Which, if there's, I don't know what they assume for per home, but 2.5 people per home. That's, 1,500 residents right there that could be here in 2 years. Next question is on that you mentioned the 1997 Parks Master Plan. Is that something that we can get online? I've never seen that, so I don't think that's on the town's website anywhere. If that could be scanned and put online somewhere, that would be helpful, I think, to everybody on the committee. So I know that I've seen the 2010 one, but like you said, I don't think that was ever finalized. And then you mentioned, so the parks have to be in the town. What if the town has a joint use agreement with a county park or a school district or that kind of thing? How does that, do we get, if it's a 10-acre facility, but we can only use it for 50% of the time, do we get 50% credit, or how does something like that work?
That's up to the town, how you want to count that. There's no state law that says one way or the other. One thing I'll caution you on, when I first started planning, jointly siting parks next to schools was the in thing to do. And in fact, state law allows the school site to be somewhat smaller if there's a park adjacent to it. The idea being that the same children would play in both parks. Unfortunately, the sign of the times is that if there's a park next to a school, it's most likely not accessible during school hours. You couldn't go out and walk your dog there. If I went out there as a guy and just sat in a park bench, it wouldn't be too long before the police showed up. And as a planner, I've been moving away from that. There certainly can be open space next to schools, and there certainly should be some joint facility usage. But schools have become more and more like prisons and less like open space. And while I can lament that, it does close off from the community the use of your open space. But at the same token, this is something we'll have to discuss, the town will have to discuss is, I forget who it is that's excited about the Little League and youth sports. It makes most sense to have those facilities next to the schools, right? Because then you can joint share the parking and the restrooms, and it just makes sense. So we have to balance that so that we don't make all of our open spaces a soccer field and a baseball field. I mean, I don't play baseball. I just don't run all that well. I walk really fast, but I don't run. I want to go play Frisbee with my dog. Well, I can't do that in a baseball field because it annoys the people playing baseball. That's just not what it's designed for. So there needs to be parks that fill the need for everybody. And that becomes the balancing act. But yes, to answer your question, we can certainly count joint use facilities. We can count joint public facilities in or out the city or city town, bad planner. We need to figure out how we want to take credit for that. I mean, it's obvious to me that some of the previous planning actions really had to squint hard to make sure you had parks to make things work. So we'll do less squinting and put better glasses on and try to really make this an issue.
Yeah, one of the issues I had was that the town seems to count Loomis Basin Park as part of their parks, but doesn't provide any funding at all for upgrades or anything out there. Typically anyways. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but the town has multiple joint use agreements with the school district. I mean, Loomis Grammar and Del Oro, the tennis courts at Del Oro, the track and football field at Del Oro, there's and the swimming pool at Del Oro, and the park at Loomis Grammar. There's joint use agreements for all those in place right now that, they've got a time limit on them. The time limit varies, but so I think those joint use agreements are going to be key to anything we come up with.
I couldn't agree more. And like I said, particularly for youth sports, that makes a great deal of sense because those facilities are already in place. What I'm seeing in other communities, though, is that as the joint use agreements come up for renewal, there's been a reluctance on the part of districts to encumber land for that type of thing. And it's an unfortunate reality that we live in. And it's something the town needs to figure out if that's okay.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you, Matt. Russ Kelly, you may unmute.
Actually, we're fortunate enough on the south side of the freeway here to have one of the largest open park spaces. And the manager, Jan Gretz, we have a use agreement. If I go down and pay, I'm allowed to play on our golf course. And it's absolutely been a great place from originally when I first came here. It's like, it's unreal the difference that that golf course has made to this community. Some of the other things are the Stonegate. We have a park in Stonegate. And originally, when I was on the Parks Commission, the folks in Loomis decided that when the county put that park in, it wasn't the town of Loomis. When the county put that park in, they were adamant about no restrooms. They didn't want any facilities there. And the only thing they have there right now, I believe, is a baseball diamond and a place where you could practice soccer. And they weren't crazy about having anybody that was anywhere else around the community to come and use that, because that was their territory. And we went through a lot of interesting scenarios with those folks to just to put the park there, just to put it there, not to have anything in it. And then the King Road Park, which Matt was talking about, the ball diamonds that are there, originally there was only, well, the girls softball field, the girls activities across the way. You all probably don't know that, but that was donated to the county by the Loomis Lions Club. We actually owned the property and donated it to the county so we could have softball fields there for the girls and that sort of thing. And the other side of the freeway, I don't know how the basketball courts got there, because it just, it was before my time. And that used to be, actually it wasn't before my time, because that was a county dump, okay? When we built that field, the county actually built that park. It had no restrooms. We didn't add restrooms on either side of those parks until probably 15 years ago, maybe even 20. But we had no restrooms there because we didn't have a way to take care of the sewage, and we actually pump it now. But that was the county dump. Where the baseball diamonds end currently, all the field towards Horseshoe Bar Road that belongs to the park is still has methane gas. You can't, county needs to properly close that so that we can use those fields for more activities. The baseball diamonds that are there, they've done a great job enhancing all that. Actually, I put up those diamonds with some volunteers and the Dupniks when we needed to have baseball diamonds there, when Lakeside Little League didn't have a place to play. And that was the only place when we moved out of Rockland, that was the only place we had to play. Okay, amongst the schools. The schools have been a godsend to all the activities of all the sports in the whole Loomis Basin. Let's see, trails. The trails, county has trails mapped out. They have horse trails mapped out. They have bicycle trails mapped out. The county has made a significant effort to put together a plan. And I think we have a bike plan in town hall hanging on the wall. They've done a pretty good job of doing the bike plans. And if you go around here on Saturday or Sunday, I could sit here on my front porch and watch 10 or 15 groups go by my house every weekend. And so we have a really good biking area. Sometimes the people that drive cars don't like it, but and I'm a biker myself. I do bike. The problem is I can't get from my house to town. The death ride is Horseshoe Bar. And I'll tell you, I ride a recumbent, which doesn't put me up taller than the cars. And it's really what you might call a death ride going down across the creek. And let's see. I think one of the things we might think about is David Tooker is a Placer County Parks Commissioner that also lives in Loomis. He lives out off of Horseshoe Bar Road, and he calls himself Loomis, and he used to be president of the baseball club, and he's a bike rider, and he's our Placer County Parks Commissioner. And he was very instrumental because he used to be superintendent of the school district. And he's the one who actually started making agreements with the schools so that we could spend the park money at the schools and benefit both the community as well as the schools. And I will tell you one other secret that not very many people know about. Matter of fact, almost none. There's a period of time in Loomis when, and there still is, you can't get a gym to play in. You can't get a place to play basketball because guess what? Every school is busy and they have agreements with people to come in and use the facilities. At one time, they used to open Del Oro High School at midnight, sometimes 10 o'clock in the evening. And they used to use the school for the kids who just wanted to play basketball. That's all they wanted to do. It wasn't authorized by the school district, but there was access to the gym. And that tells me that there's a great need for basketball, for volleyball, for those kind of things to be able to go someplace in Loomis, similar to the Hardwood Palace, where I have 4 grandkids. I have 3 of them that play every single weekend at Hardwood Palace or any of the parks or the schools. They're playing soccer and basketball and sometimes baseball. But we have a significant need to have places for kids to play when there's not school going. And sometimes that means in an industrial area, at least it is in at the Hardwood Palace, where the businesses use the parking during the daytime, and in the evening time or after 5 o'clock, the activities are there for basketball, and you get an extreme amount of people coming to the community to visit, to stay and play tournaments. It happens every single Saturday, Sunday. And it's I spend a lot of time there myself. So I think that's about it. I've covered pretty much everything that I know about Loomis.
Thank you, Russ. Bonnie, you're up next.
Hi, just had a couple of questions. So with the 8,000 residents, with the land, the open space and parks that we have identified, and including the Sunrise, how much acreage do we have calculated? Because I guess we'll need that to determine how much we'll need.
That's correct. I'm embarrassed to let you know that I don't have that number. We don't have that number. So that's part of what we're doing as part of the existing sort of inventory, is to find out. And then we have to decide, thank heavens we have Russ. We have the history here. We have to decide how we're going to count the stuff that we don't actually own, but we use. How does that meet with it? Now, some of those figures are in the 1997 plan and were updated in the draft 2010 plan. But I've not been able to verify those with the GIS and actually know acreage and sit down with the town staff and figure that out. We will get that to you before the next meeting, and we'll make sure it's posted so you have that.
Okay. And then I also want to reiterate a request to be able to access the 97 plan and then the 2010 draft. I know that I'd had a copy of the draft, but I can't find it. But I'm not able to access it anywhere online when I search for it. So the other question I had is, what about like safe routes to schools? I mean, I have kids that go to a school just down the street from us. And Laird is just a nightmare during drop off and pickup. And I know that it's the same way for Placer Elementary and for all of the other schools. And we literally just live around the corner from the school. And I believe that there's even access to the backside of the school, but it's the right of way is owned by PCWA. And so we can't even walk to school. And I know that that's just, you know, we have a lot of residents who are really upset and complain about the traffic. And I'm just wondering if that might be a kind of a win-win situation where, you know, we can kind of, you know, get less people off the roads, get kids walking and riding their bikes to school, which would be healthier too.
So that's both a combination of the circulation mobility conversation. You'd be surprised at how angry people get when I tell them we're going to narrow lanes to put in bicycle facilities. Suddenly I'm taking away their firstborn child. It's an interesting conversation. The other thing I will note to you is you could probably fund all of the parks by putting a police officer near a school during pickup and drop off time, because what parents do to drop off and pick up their kids is quite interesting. In most of the cases, it's not safe. And I don't know what they're thinking at that time, but I honestly don't. Like I said, I had 5. So I'm not immune to having to have done that as well. But safe routes to school is definitely something we would do. When we do open space and we're talking about trails, it's nice if the trails go somewhere, right? And we like to connect homes with shopping, with schools, with libraries and other facilities. So it's important to make sure the trails go somewhere. Not that there isn't absolute unfettered joy in wandering around just because it's beautiful. But it's nice if the trails serve a dual purpose and get you someplace like a school. So yes, that's definitely something we take into account. And if we come across right-of-ways that aren't being used, we'll contact the owner, find out if there's a way that we can do that. I think that's fine. And it's certainly something we would do as part of our due diligence on this.
Thank you.
Eden, you're up next.
Yes, thank you. So part of what I do with the California State Parks is I do a lot of licensing agreements and use agreements with not just counties but also city or in town jurisdictions who we may own the property and they want to make use out of it, or vice versa, where we want to make use out of it on a state level and provide state funding on a county or a city park. I know we don't have any state park facilities close or within Loomis town limits, but do we have anything? Do we have other organizations out there, whether it's the Historical Preservation Society or something like that, where we can take a look at some of the uses? So this might not be active recreation, but it might be more passive recreation, where we're looking at, say it's like a historical marker and there's a green space around it, or say there's again going back to the whole drainage easements and use of green spaces as essentially a thoroughfare from one place to another. Do we need to own that acreage in order for that to count count within the town within the general plan, or can we actually just have use of it, and would that work?
It's entirely up to how.
Mark, you're muted.
Yes, thank you. I wonder after 2020 and we get around with all this, if we'll all still look at each other and just, as opposed, anyway, it's been a long day. The long and the short of it is it's entirely up to the town and how you want to count those. Personally, from my perspective, even though the agreements can be long-term, as you know, they ultimately go away. And if some of the agreements go away, are you left with a shortage that you can't live with? And so a lot of that is factored in. Some communities only count that as partial open space, and so we still account for it. I guess my short answer is it's really entirely up to what the town wants to do. There's no edict from on high on the ratio or how you want to count the land. I mean, one of the things we'll probably discuss at the land use committee, in the full committee, but also I could see this committee getting into this a little bit, is what about private open space? What about those developments that provide private parkland within them for their use? Is that counted? Some communities do, some communities don't. And so those are sorts of things we'll have to work through. In terms of an inventory of all the potential lands, absolutely, we're working on it. But some of that stuff involves turning over rocks and barrels and looking up trees and figuring out where things are. And the ownership isn't always as clear as we'd like to believe. And so sometimes that's a challenge, but we're working on that, and we'll have to have more for the committee to chew on when we meet again.
Jesse, you're up next.
Jesse.
You may
Sorry, it takes me a half hour to figure this out. I guess the big question comes down to, how do we fund parks? I mean, and how do developers pay to get out of putting in parks when we have a rule about 200 people and we need 1 acre of parkland? And is there anything that can be done in a general plan to stop that, where developers can't buy their way out of parks? That's it. Thanks.
Well, the short answer is sure, you can set an edict on high that thou shalt. The difficulty is there's always a project that's too small to really warrant putting a parkland on it, right? And you're adding a duplex, for example. So you could do the calculation and you have to provide 6 square feet of open space or something goofy. And then the really large projects were there. I can tell you something from a planning perspective, and having implemented many plans and sat on the other side of the counter where I was staff. An agency seldom, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, never collects sufficient money to actually do what they're looking for. And it's partially because of the politics associated with establishing a fee that's high enough to get things done. It's also a function of the fact that if you pay the fee today, the costs tomorrow are going to be higher. And costs in the construction world, I don't know if any of you are playing in that world, can vary wildly from year to year. Cost of materials, cost of labor, all of those things. So it's almost, you don't want the money, you want the improvement. And part of what we try to do through this general plan process is identify where those go and then establish programs to get there. And it really becomes one of management. You need to make sure that you know what's going on and when, because, you know, if you take a park, and parks are incredibly expensive to develop. It really shocks people if we give you the actual numbers for the design, the construction, the irrigation, all of those things that go into a park. People's minds get blown. These are expensive things to have in a community. And then you divide it by 1,000 people, which is about 330 homes. And you can start to see that the cost per home could be $15,000, $20,000. That's a lot of money. And that doesn't count from operation and maintenance, which is another thing that goes by. So you're absolutely right that there's an issue that we have to discuss. But first, let's talk about the parks, and then let's figure out how to get there, and through the committee. Because if we start going down that rabbit hole, then it just gets really hard to plan. I think we should plan first, and then figure out how best to make this work in an incremental fashion. So you can build trails incrementally. They don't all have to be done at once. But I would put to you that you don't not build the trail because it doesn't go anywhere. You build the trail, the first 100 feet, 500 feet, 600 feet. And then even if you have to sit for a couple of years before the next one gets built, you do that too. And eventually they'll connect. The town has to take the long view. It can't take the 20 days from now view. It has to take the long view in this. And by putting this in the plan, we should be able to get that together. But what you bring up is a perfect point. And it's something that needs to be considered both in the general plan and as the implementation piece. I don't have a quick answer for you, Jesse. I wish I did, but I'm just being truthful with you. If we collect the money, chances are it's less than we need to actually build the improvement, both at the beginning and then over time. It's just, and that goes for streets and sewers and water lines and parks and schools and all of those things. There has to be other subvention. Now, the way communities usually deal with that is they hope there's a grant program available and they can buy their way up on the grant by having more money to put toward the park. So they're getting a grant for half the park because they have the money for the other half, and that looks better to the granting agency. That's how grants work. Just putting that out there. So that's often how that is done, and for better or for worse. But certainly we should be able to talk about that. But let's do the planning first, and then the staging of it, and then figure out how to make that happen.
Andy, you're up next.
Yeah, I kind of, definitely funding is a problem. And I know as the town is looking at development proposals, huge question, such as in the former villages, there's 12 acres of open space, and how's that maintained, who owns it, et cetera. So definitely we have to look at that. But I wanted to bring up in the conservation element and with the town's oak tree ordinance, we've been inventorying potential places where the town can plant oak trees. And at this point in time, we have a total of 100 trees we could plant somewhere. I believe that's the number. And so I think there's an opportunity to look at either private land or other lands for preservation of oak woodlands. And if you look at the conservation map, Loomis is about 40% in oak woodlands, a significant amount of oak woodlands that would be wonderful to be preserved, and then take a look at it for trails, etc. How do you fund that? How do you manage that? But I think it's an opportunity that the town has. Plus, from the town standpoint, we need to find more places to plant and maintain oak woodland. So throw that together. So conservation and parks, recreation, open space really tie together. So I just wanted to put that out there for us to think about.
Thank you, Andy. Bonnie, you're next.
And actually, this will tie right into that because have we spoken with Placer Land Trust? I know that I reached out to Jeff Darlington when Planning Commission approved Costco, because I believe that there was like 10 acres or so that they needed to be able to fund of oak woodlands. And so maybe that was another way that we might be able to get some stakeholders involved to facilitate. There was that. And then I also would go back to Mark's, point about having the long view. My background's in healthcare, and what we tend to do are what we call mortality and morbidity conferences, where we take a look at something that, do case studies and identify what we did well, what we didn't do well, what we could learn, so that moving forward, we can do better. And I just think it'd be great to hear from Jean, but, in Montserrat, that was an opportunity of where we did have, I think, an opportunity to have some open space if we had clustered the community. And my understanding is that the mayor at the time was adamantly opposed to it and wanted to keep a rural feel. But the sad part is that people do still come and walk in the area. They just have to walk along the roads as opposed to, some beautiful areas. And so the point being that, it's much easier to put the trails in before the houses come. Once they come, forget about it. So thank you.
Russ Kelly, you're up next.
Just so everyone should know, the King Road Park was offered to the town of Loomis from the county. Now, the problem is that King Road is not really in the town of Loomis. And even if you went from the park to Horseshoe Bar and went across the property lines over there and got access to that, it probably could connect to the town of Loomis, but it still wouldn't be in the town of Loomis. The reason the county wanted to give that park was when they were looking to cut costs, the county costs. That particular park runs about $84,000 a year in maintenance money. Okay, so the county said, well, you know, if you guys take over the park, we'd be happy to give it to you. And the other part of that is still the methane gas that's there. If any of you have got time, you might go down to Granite Bay, Tree Lake Park in Granite Bay is a park that was put in by the developer. The reason for that is the developer can build a park cheaper than we can build a park. And I know the issue is union labor and prevailing wage. But that park down there was built by the developer, and it had very strict requirements as to what it was. But it's a beautiful, small little park. It's got soccer fields and that sort of thing. But when the developer builds it, it'll cost us far less money. And I think it's worth the benefit of not having to use prevailing wage to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. I see no additional raised hands. Is anybody else needing to speak from the committee?
I think I'll wrap up the committee questions then. Thank you so much, all of you, for such very well thought out, meaningful questions, and we've got some really great answers. One of the things that I think is important, and thank you, Matt Fox, for putting that link for the 2010 plan is, you know, the town really did a lot of work on that 2010 plan, and I think it's important for all of us to look at it, even though it was never formally approved, just to kind of see where they were at that time, where we were at that time. So I'd really like to see that as part of an easily accessible document. The other thing is SACOG is doing their Parks and Trails strategic plan, a development plan for all of our area, and they're looking for people to sort of to do public outreach and to do surveys and everything else, and obviously we're included in that. So I will make sure and pass on that information so anybody that's interested can get onto the SACOG site for their Parks and Trails strategic development plan. The other thing that I wanted to just point out is, you know, when we saw that PowerPoint come up and we saw the 4 names of the parks, including the golf course, and some of those aren't parks. My facility is a recreation facility, so maybe we could just move it down a little bit. But again, I think it's important that we do get the total number of acres that we actually do have, just like Bonnie said, that would be really huge. So anyway, thank you very much for some great questions. Do we have any public comment?
At this time,
You're muted, Mary Beth.
there we go. Jean Wilson.
Great.
What?
Go ahead, Jean.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, a lot of good information, and I just have some comments and a question. One is about probably we should check into PCWA, whether they want anybody next to their canals or not. And as Bonnie mentioned, they can't get through at Montserrat. And I think in general, there are no trespassing signs for PCWA canals, but something worth checking into. As far as our contracts with the school for joint use, one of the things is we have paid our park money into that. So it's not like we have no investment in it. So they probably would have to take that into account whenever, I don't know the lengths of those agreements, but we have put town money into it from our parks money. I agree that it would be worthwhile to take a look at the 2010 parks plan. I think it did go through the planning commission and then got, for whatever reason, just kind of set aside by the council. But whatever is in that means that it's what, 13 years newer or something than the 1997 plan. So at that point, people were looking at what are the changes that had happened. And I think it would be worthwhile to look at that, not just the old plan, even though it, as we were told, it isn't the same degree of that legitimacy, I guess, as something that is in the current plan, but the plan that the old plan. But I think because there were updated information and ideas, it's worth looking at. As far as private plans, private parks in individual settings, I'm thinking of the Taylor Road mixed use, which is kind of generally under construction. It's got housing at the back of it. This is on Taylor Road next to the old KOA. Housing at the back and commercial to be developed on the front. That does have a little park in there for the residents. And you're right, we never discussed how that would be counted or not counted in our kinds of things. Let's see. One of the questions I have is that Mark seems to be counting parks and open space as one category. And in Loomis, I think they have basically been counted as two separate categories. And we have two separate fees that we charge when you're going to build a house or any kind of development. You have a parks fee, and that's separate from the open space fee. The idea being that we want to have money set aside for more developed recreational kind of parkland, as well as more passive use open space. So that was a little confusing to me if they're being lumped together, how we're looking at that. And I think there was one other question, but it slipped my mind at the moment. Anyway, that's one of the issues I think we need to figure out. If we're charging two separate fees, are we still going to be looking at two kinds of parks and open space? Or are we now lumping everything together? As far as I know, we've never done any open space purchases. And by the way, the developers, we can charge them money or get land for developing a park, setting aside land, but they don't pay for the maintenance. And that's one of the reasons the town has been reluctant to own parkland. We do have Sunrise Loomis and now Blue Anchor Park, but basically that's one of the reasons that we have done joint use with the schools. It's not only convenient to do that, but then they're taking care of all the maintenance, and the town does not have separate kind of funding for any kind of maintenance. So they've always tried to be careful about not owning more than we can take care of. Thank you.
That's a good one, Jean. We will be sure to differentiate between parkland and open space. That's a very good point. There is a way to fund these, but the town may not be interested in that, and funds the maintenance of those. It's a program called Mello-Roos, and it's typically assigned to new projects, but it is a form of taxation, and it does come with its own baggage. We can certainly talk about that as a committee, and I'll be able to give you some information on that. But that is how other areas are paying for the maintenance of parks and other things for that matter. So I'll leave it at that for now, because that's a really dark rabbit hole that we don't really want to go down at this point. But there is a way to do that.
We're back to Anders.
Yeah, Gene brought up that the town didn't have open space, but as we were looking at the Homewood use permit, discovered that actually Homewood dedicated some open space between their facility and Taylor Road to the town. So we're still researching exactly what the town owns in that open space, but there's some oak woodland that the town owns.
Thank you. Next up is Matt Fox.
Yeah, I just want to really quick mention that for those of you that aren't aware, the county, Placer County, did a extensive survey I think 3 years ago, and developed a countywide parks and trails master plan. That their survey is broken down by region and town and everything. So, and there's some good questions in there and some good survey results that we might be able to pick up and use, as far as what every area prioritizes as far as parks. And then they've got, proposed trails maps that, it's the county, so it doesn't include the Loomis city town limits, but they've got trails that they propose that basically end at the town limits. So we need to make sure we account for that to tie into those. So we're coordinating with that. And that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt.
Anybody else?
No, ma'am.
And I posted a link to the Master County's plan in the comments over there.
Thank you for doing that, Matt. Anybody else? Mary Beth?
Nope, no hands are raised.
Okay, so let's sort of recap. We have a lot of homework to do. We have some links here to the right, which let's go ahead and grab those links, Mary Beth, and make sure that our committee members have access to them, either by email or at a place that we can all find. And then we're looking forward to getting some of those documents that I think would really, that a lot of us agree, the 2010 plan that we have here would be great for us to see. Then we will be also going back and looking at our general plan in its existence now. There are settings that are some of the newer parts of the general plan to take a look at, and also if there's any changes that are on there, then we'll be able to see those too. So we will meet again April 22nd. Is that right? Yep.
And if I could ask, so the understanding is that you want us to read the entire general plan, and I think that's okay. That's why we're on this, and then also I'm going to read the document that Matt sent, and we're going to look somehow for that 1997 master plan, right? Because I don't think we know where that is yet, do we?
So Mary Beth, we'll be able to bring that hopefully into an area that we can just have all of this information at one spot, or can we?
Yes, and my goal for that is to get a copy of the 97 Parks and Rec master plan, identify it as being approved at whatever date, the resolution going along with it. The 2010 that Matt provided, I'll make sure it has not approved, because I remember, a year or so ago, looking back through how that went through Planning Commission and lots of discussion at council with direction back to staff, but it never came back forward. So,
okay,
trying to identify that. And then also I'll post the link that Matt provided for the Placer Parks plan. And where these things will be housed is in the Parks and Rec subcommittee, so that you can just go on the website and grab those off of there.
And Jen, you said that there was, or somebody said that you wanted us to make comments And what's the facility for that? And I'll just shut up now so you can answer, or just, you probably were gonna say that anyway. Thanks, bye.
No, that's a really good point. And Mary Beth, why don't you field that question? Because, I mean, that's part of our job as this committee is to come up with our comments. But can you please let everybody know, Mary Beth, that they can do multiple comments? Is that right? Throughout the process?
We created a comment form that's posted on the general plan front page of that 2020 update page. And the comment form, it's a single page, but it does have specific columns. So when you're looking at these documents, they're in a mode where the lines on each page are numbered. The pages are numbered. At the bottom, they have version numbers. So let's say the Parks and Rec setting is version 1. What we're trying to do is let you focus on where in the document that is so that we can go right to it and see what you're saying. So if you'd like, I can send that form independently out to the committee so you have it readily available, but it is out there on the website. And it's pretty, well, we think it's pretty self-directing as far as putting in the page and the element and, those kinds of things, and multiple pages if you need.
No, excellent questions. Anybody else have any questions? All right, we have a lot to do, and this was some strong work this evening. Thank you all very, very much. The town is blessed to have each and every one of you to go through with this with us and the rest of the town. So with that, I'll say goodnight and adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thanks.
Good night.